So let's just jump straight in. I'd like to introduce Anita Veivers, who's going to moderate our panel discussion. Anita's the Executive Director, Centacare of Queensland and Catholic Early Learning and Care. Anita's passionate about working with people. She's worked in the social services sector for more than 30 years, holding various leadership, management and government roles. Anita is the Executive Director of Centacare of Queensland, delivering services across mental health and wellbeing, aged care, disability support, multicultural services and early childhood education and care. Having introduced a range of social innovation initiatives in response to community need, Anita promotes a collective approach to service delivery. Initiatives such as School Savvy, is that right? Savvy? School Savvy and Work Savvy have engaged at the local level in collaborative responses to community need. She's a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and is currently Deputy Chair and Director of Catholic Social Services Australia, a role which allows Anita to share her passion for place-based service delivery at a national level. Welcome, Anita, to the moderation chair. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that introduction. That was lovely. Look, I'm just going to start by saying that this is my first time moderating a panel, and when Josh didn't actually ask me, I think, to put my name on the list. First of all, I was a bit surprised, but actually it's a subject that I am very passionate about, that is very close to my heart, that working together and collaborating is really the best way that we can support and serve our communities. So I was very pleased to take on the challenge. So please bear with me. I've asked the panel to be gentle with me. So as we start, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm going to read the introduction because I think that it really sort of sets the scene very well for where we're at. So this session is really around collaboration, and there are a number of factors impacting our sector at the moment. So market competition, dropping volunteering rates, government compliance, procurement and legislative requirements. And they're just some of the challenges affecting the ability of Catholic organisations to respond with agility to the needs of our times. Can Catholic organisations and broader church networks actualise their shared vision and potential for bettering our communities, to be a church on the margins for the margins? How might social services collaborate better with health and education to achieve this end? We know collaborations across any mix of Catholic health, social services, education, parishes and dioceses can work for building a more just and compassionate society, but these are not always easy. What does it take to make collaborations work? What doesn't let them work? And what are some of the ideas where we could work better into the future as a group of organisations across various sectors as we look to respond holistically to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor? I'd like to introduce the panel members that we have with us today. So we have Marcelle Mogg, who joined Mental Health Victoria, the peak body for mental health, as CEO in July 2022, having worked in the health and community services sector for over 30 years. Marcelle brings over 20 years' experience as a senior executive in health and community services to the role, together with experience as a non-executive director in the not-for-profit sector. Through her professional life, Marcelle's work has centred on leadership, strategy, advocacy, government relations, organisational culture, leading change and communication. So please welcome Marcelle. I'd also like to introduce Matthew Cassin. Matthew has 25 years' experience within the banking and finance industry. Prior to joining the Catholic Development Fund in 2014, he spent 12 years with the Commonwealth Bank in Australia in various product and business development roles. Throughout his professional career, Matthew has developed strong expertise in fund administration, investment management, strategic development and risk management. In his role as the Chief Executive Officer of CDF, Matthew leads a team of 50+ individuals who are working to provide great customer service through product and process innovation that responds to the financial service needs of Catholic organisations. So please welcome Matthew. didn't do very well at turning my page over in advance. So I'd also like to introduce Dr. Edward Simons. Dr. Edward Simons was appointed Executive Director of Melbourne Archdiocese Catholic Schools in March 2023. As the largest Catholic education provider in Australia and one of the most prominent Catholic education systems in the world, Max is responsible for the governance and operation of more than 300 schools across the Archdiocese of Melbourne, employing over 17,000 staff who educate more than 112,000 students. So please welcome Edward Simons. And lastly, we have Mr. Craig Arthur. Craig is the National Administrator of the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Catholic Council, NARCI, based in Adelaide. He has a strong commitment to social justice and places emphasis on the principles of subsidiarity in the design and delivery of council programs and projects. He has worked with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people for 20 years and continues to support Australia's First Peoples in their journey to be a valued and supported group within the Catholic Church in Australia. So please welcome Mr. So we're hoping that this session will be a little more conversational. So each of our speakers is going to spend just 3 or 4 minutes just talking about their experience in collaboration, how that connects into the subject that we're talking about this morning, and then we'll move into more of a sort of question scenario. So.
Okay. Thank you, Anita, very much. It's fantastic to be here, and thank you for the invitation through Josh and to my colleagues here on the panel. If I can, just 30 seconds as well on where we are today and where you were yesterday. It's great to have you here at our Catholic Leadership Centre, celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. Great to have you all here. This room is often full of students from across our MAC schools, often full of staff from across our MAC schools, and it's wonderful to have you here with us today. And can I encourage you to use the facility into the future as much as each of your agencies are willing and able to. It's a wonderful surrounding. I'm going to just touch on a couple of things in the 2 or 3 minutes. And my ears pricked up in the last conversation when Professor Wiseman spoke to social connectedness. And I'm just keen to reflect on that in regards to the schools that we operate here in Melbourne, and I think and hope that there's a conversation that is perhaps not in any way unique to the Melbourne context, but could be replicated right across Australia: Catholic school, government school, independent school, and seeing colleagues here from Western Australia where I previously worked, and even some of the schools that Erica works with closely up in the Kimberley. So it's more of a general point, and that is, I think, that schools now, in a way perhaps more than ever before, are places of gathering and community and solidarity when so much of the social fabric of Australia has been lost. And of course, to some extent, that includes attendance at Mass. And therefore, there is a responsibility of school, and in our context, our Catholic schools, to do as much as we possibly can. I was reading earlier this week that 1 in 4 adult Australians identify as feeling lonely and isolated. And clearly those feelings of adults will be replicated by the students that come to our classrooms every day. So as part of this conversation, I'm keen to call out the extraordinary work which agencies in this room and many others do to provide opportunities, care, support, connectedness, and better livelihoods for our students and our staff. I want to acknowledge and celebrate the dedication, the staff that go above and beyond in each of the local school contexts, often not always recognised in the way that it should be. But I also want to say at a central level, we have to find ways of doing more and better. And that's probably not through lack of effort, it's through lack of understanding exactly how we can cut through and have the best impact that we can. And if I can, I'll just give an example whilst we're here, because hopefully you've seen fair share people walking around with their aprons on over the course of the last day or so. We're delighted to host Fair Share here, utilising our commercial kitchens on the premises, which until this point in that 10-year existence of this facility haven't really been used to the extent that they should have been. We were open arms when Fair Share looked to move from their Abbotsford location to this one as a result of a refurbishment that they were required to undertake. And over the course of the last 12 months or so, they've produced hundreds of thousands of meals in this facility, benefiting people at the margins and disadvantaged for all the reasons that people need good, healthy, nutritious food. And we'd be delighted to host that. It's a small arm open moment that we can offer, an extended hand that we can offer to support. And I'm keen as part of this conversation to work out what Max can do more and how we can work more across other agencies within the Archdiocese, but also further afield.
Thanks very much for that. I think a couple of important points there that we can sort of take on, which is really around, I guess, recognising that schools are the centre of our community in a lot of ways, and that they're more than just a place of education. But also, I think, the example here, underutilised facilities. I think, within all our dioceses, we probably have underutilised facilities, and maybe that's a challenge to us to think about how can we use them better so that we can actually extend the reach that we have in our community. So thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on to Matthew.
Thank you very much. I'll talk a bit about, I guess, an area that I know best, and that's the Catholic Development Fund, and also the part of the church ecosystem I belong to, which is the wider city movement. And just talk a little bit about an opportunity, I think, the collaboration I know much less about, but I think it's really important. But I work for the Catholic Development Fund, and we started as a collaboration between the parish priests here in Melbourne who were trying to build schools. There was rich parishes, that's poor parishes, and some could build schools, some couldn't. So they created a still private fund, so they became the Catholic Development Fund to pool all the money from all the parishes, and therefore every parish could then build a school. It worked really well, and we replicated it across Australia. So that's 26 different Catholic Development Funds, doing similar kind of things across the country, and it's grown in size significantly, and it's still continuing to have the same function. So it represents I guess a systemised form of collaboration between Catholic organisations, and we still pool all the savings from across the Catholic organisations and individuals to make one demand. Historically, it's mainly been school education, lesser degree parishes, and to a much lesser degree social services organisations. But that's changing very quickly, and so with the Housing Australia Future Fund encouraging investment in social housing, we're seeing much stronger alignment between social services organisations looking to participate in the social housing bill and coming to the city and looking for funds. And so our job then is to go out to all the other Catholic organisations and all the other cities around the country and aggregate money needed to pump into that social housing bill. So that's, I guess, a way that we collaborate behind the scenes to do the work, support your work. I'll talk a bit about also that you've got 26 different CDS funds. It's quite like every bishop has to have their own bank. And there are a lot around the country, but there is a real strong element of collaboration in some areas between those organisations. And one is things around IT systems. So they are risky, they're complicated, get them wrong, it's catastrophic, and very expensive to maintain if you've got to up to date. So of all those centres in the country, 23 of them operate one IT platform. That's managed here in Melbourne, which has significantly reduced the cost of each of those organisations maintaining their own core operating system, and significantly reduced the risk that comes along with that. So it's worked really well. We don't always agree what we should do, but we eventually get there in the end, and we'll continue to do that. And then another area of collaboration is that we pool our resources when we need to. So we're very large organisations and big environment requirements. We'll put our money together to meet those environment requests, and that happens quite well. So there are two fairly narrow areas. Well, not narrow, they're important, but fairly narrow areas that we collaborate on. Other than that, we'll do our own thing, and we're just offering our own license and look after our own customers. I was going to go on to the second thing, which I think is an opportunity for collaboration. And I go back to a scenario where I was in the office of the CEO of a big Catholic hospital, and I'm doing my job trying to encourage them to deposit money or invest their money into the Catholic Development Fund so we can make one demand. And he goes, Matthew, don't tell me what you're going to do with the money. I want you to show me. I want you to demonstrate to me when we put money with the CDF, that money's going to be linked up to an organisation, and it's going to build a new classroom, it's going to get someone off the streets. I want you to quantify the benefit back to me for money. And that's quite a hard ask to me. And we haven't been able to do that effectively eventually. And what it would mean is a really sophisticated data strategy where You measure the outputs of all the customers you serve and quantify the impact they're having on the ground. Now, you know, in that scenario, and I'm going to know much less about, it's very expensive. Data scientists are cheap, technology is very expensive. But I do know that our investors want to see that evidence. I know that governments want to see that evidence when they trust us with taxpayer money. I know that donors want to see that evidence when they give money to us. Our employees want to see the evidence when they can work for us. And we also have a privileged tax position. We're not taxed. And that's a privilege that comes from the fact that we provide public good. And we do that very efficiently. So we have this privileged tax status. And in order to preserve that privileged tax status, we've got to demonstrate public good we're delivering, which requires a very sophisticated, I think, data-driven operating model, data evidence of operating model evidence. That's and I recognise it's a very big ask, but if we could do that, it really look good data. So.
Thanks very much, Matthew. I think, you know, data is becoming more and more important to all of our organisations, and I guess that's one of the things that we probably struggle with, or social service providers. We're very good at the doing, but the measuring what we're doing is maybe not so great. So maybe that's, you know, a potential opportunity there to be able to collaborate better with our CDFs, because I'm sure that maybe most of us didn't realise that the behind the scenes work you're doing around, say, that IT system that's supported every diocese, and the you know, investment in social housing is happening. So I think it's great that you've been able to share that with us, so thank you. If we could just move on now to Craig.
Thanks very much, Anita. Note to self, change LinkedIn photo from something that was 2 hours old and looks like I came out of the races. So. In any case, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm in awe of everything that all of you do around the place. You know, that practical social services is bringing it right through the life. We need smart fellows like Matthew to keep things running. But we're on the other side of the pendulum a little bit. So I'm with the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Catholic Council, and have been for, start to say, nearly a quarter of a century, which is a really long time. But the one thing I'm looking back at the council, and I'm so pleased that trusted to come and talk today, was that instilled in me a concept of collaboration. Everything we've done over the years has been collaborative. We're just not big enough to meet the goals, the lofty goals and the expectations that we have without help. And it's groups here, I see lots of faces that have helped us in one way or another, and we're just so absolutely grateful. But you know, there's 135,000 plus Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Catholics in Australia, and that's got 10 councillors and 1 over 80 staff. So, you know, so that's how we try and operate. So we need to collaborate. It's just the way it is. And culturally, for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, collaboration, you know, we call it reciprocity or working together. But for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, it's more than a word. It's in the DNA. Traditionally, you had to collaborate with language groups or different family groups or communities to survive. And that is something that still continues today. And I'm really proud that when we collaborate with people, we come to the table and we say, as Nancy, what can we offer as well? You know, there's that giving, not just taking. So, and that's another thing that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people always have in their culture is reciprocity. It's culturally appropriate. It resonates that Catholic beliefs, which we've all talked about today, the unity and interconnectedness of data. We see, you know, the collaboration within nature itself and the symbiotic relationships. Like, it's a natural, it's not something that should be forced. It's what we naturally do is to collaborate. And I guess being on the other side of things is, you know, the one asking for help. We've always found in collaborating with Catholic organisations to be a good experience. We've had good track record. I can't call, you know, how many times we've been knocked back when we come asking for something, and that's testament because we all have a shared common goal And I think we should make it harder than it needs to be in this situation. With Catholics, we're all in the same boat, and we collaborated. One of the big collaborations we did was the One Journey Together referendum campaign, where we sort of collaborated with Josh and CCSV, Caritas, Jesuit Social Services to create this one-stop shop for Catholics to get information on the referendum. We'll probably unpack that a little more as we go on, but that was that culminated with 25 big Catholic organisations coming together to say that we want to help you amplify the voices of these Australians. So we've really seen that collaborative effort and the fruit that bears. I'll just sort of put a note here to say, working in that Catholic sphere has got that advantage that we've got a common faith, common ground, but sort of heading out and as you guys would in your work more than I would into the secular world is when it gets difficult. Like it becomes harder because you don't have that commonality of faith and mission. With the demise of CCI, we had to go into the big bad world and meet with insurance companies, and there's no commonality there. Absolutely, it's just a totally different feel, and it's like, well, I'm so pleased that we're all on the same page with our faith and our Catholic social teachings. And I was just I was thinking about the collaborative. I'm jumping around a bit, but in negotiation, there's that saying where two groups come together for an effective negotiation. No, it's all right, I reckon. For effective negotiations, two groups come together, both have to win, both have to lose to get a successful negotiation. But I think with collaboration, I think both groups have to win. Like, I think you have to come to a point where it's mutually beneficial, because in all our lines of work, when both of our groups win, the people we serve are the winners. And that's what we actually want. So I've jumped around a lot, Anita, sorry.
No, that's great, thank you. I think, as you said, as a small organisation, collaborating was vital to being able to really achieve and to get things done. And that sort of, I think, brings us back to something that Sister Bridget said just in the last session as well, around being expected to do more with less. And we are all being expected to do more with less, and collaboration is a way of us being able to stretch those resources. There's something else. Of course, as well, and a reminder there for us of the opportunity that's presented of learning from our First Nations people and taking that opportunity of every chance that we get as well. So thank you for that. Marcelle.
Thanks, Anita. Just pay my respects to the Wurundjeri Woi people and thank them for their stewardship and modelling of how to live in healthy relationship with land and with one another. And pay my respect to elders of all Aboriginal and First Nations, Torres Strait Islander people who are here today. In preparing for today, I was asked to sort of reflect on where I'd seen collaboration working well, and notwithstanding the many examples that I know people in this room will be able to point to, there are two that I'd just like to highlight. One really struck me when I was living and working in Canberra with Catholic Social Services Australia, and that was the power of advocacy and the effectiveness and cut-through of ACCAF, the Australian Catholic Religious Against Trafficking in Humans. Year after year, they would arrive in Canberra, a band of 10 to 20 people. They would go around, they would meet with all of the politicians, and they were so incredibly effective. They had a really clear agenda, they spoke with one voice, they stuck to their talking points, they had a clear message and a clear ask that they put to federal politicians. And they were enormously effective and continue to be so year after year. They have taken, through their leadership, they've taken an obscure, not well understood issue that affected and continues to affect a very vulnerable part of our community, vulnerable people in our community, those who are trafficked, those who are captured in forced marriage, and brought that to the attention of our federal politicians and drove legislative reform and policy reform as a consequence. And I think for me, reflecting back into the tail end of the previous speakers that I heard in the session before about what works, how we capture voice of government, I think that as a model of a clear message, clear collaboration, one voice, sticking to the talking points, no one particular name above the door. It wasn't Catholic Service X or Y. It was speaking with one voice, and that was a hugely effective model that I sort of looked at and thought, yep, I need to be able to bottle that myself and follow that sort of discipline. That was really effective. The other was, again, sort of around that time, and it sticks in my mind because that was a really tough time. That was, those of you who've been watching Nemesis in recent weeks, I started watching it and had to switch off because it was too very traumatising. So that's when I was in Canberra, and it was the era when the federal budget that will always be in my mind, the lifters and leaners budget, was handed down, and it totally just sideswiped the entire communities that are served by the people in the Strait and their team. It totally isolated them, put them in a bucket and said, we're just not going to deal with that. You're either a lifter, you're somebody who contributes, or you're a leaner. And we don't want to sort of think about that. So getting any kind of political or advocacy traction during those years was pretty difficult. It was also the time, during that time, when the Arab Spring was underway, and consequent to that movement was some of the conflict in Iraq and Syria, and the resettlement of people from those countries in Australia quite urgently as a consequence of those crises. And here in Melbourne, there was a really effective partnership between St Vincent's Health, particularly its aged care services, Catholic Care Melbourne, as it was then, the local Catholic primary schools, and the local community of Eltham. That Voices of Eltham, Welcome to Eltham movement that grew up and sustained and supported those communities. They resettled, I think at the time there was some 100 people resettled into housing provided by St Vincent's, supported by Catholic Care Melbourne, with additional support by the Catholic, local Catholic primary schools, meant that those people who were resettled had housing, they had employment support, English support, linked into employment, companionship through the community, friendship through the community, all of that wraparound assistance. Government didn't kick in a brass farthing for that. Catholic Care Melbourne was able to get out and find some donors and draw on philanthropic support to help drive those services and that delivery. And I point to that example because as I was reflecting on what makes collaboration, there are always positive catalysts and negative catalysts. The positive catalysts are when we, as a group, are able to focus on the personal community in need and keep that as our focus. Not how will this program or this project or this tender position us as an entity, or mean that we've got more in our bottom line, or, you know, this will be good for us as a service provider. But when we look and we are guided by the need of the people in the communities we serve, and I think we get ourselves into all sorts of trouble when we lose that focus. So that as a positive catalyst. But the second is urgency and a burning platform and a crisis. And I think that whether it was the crisis arising from the Arab Spring and the need to find an immediate solution for a population that was literally on our doorstep at the time, meant that we abandoned the month's worth of meetings and, you know, business plans and risk assessments, and people just got it done. And that's phenomenal. And I think that's when we're at our best, because you have to let go. It's not that you ignore those things, but you let go of those things being the first considerations. And you look at how can we respond rather than what we can't do. And again, I think that's where I've seen Catholic communities at their best, when they're guided by what they can do rather than what they can't do. And so I suppose finally I would just want to wrap my observations with a special shout out to those in roles of governance, those on boards, those who are trustees in the room or want to be trustees in the room one day, whatever it might be. And that is to ensure that as part of your plan every year, you enable your CEOs, leadership teams and service teams to have time and resource to do the work in partnership and to set targets for collaboration and partnership. If you don't set that as part of the agenda, it will never happen. It cannot be a bolt-on or an add-on or something that gets done in the additional time available or the additional resources available, because those things just don't happen. So if we do not prioritise collaboration and partnership, drop a bit of the ego about whose name goes above the door and who is the head contract holder, it just isn't really going to get off the ground. So I would just urge, if we are truly focused on this wonderful theme of common good, we're going to be less worried about us and a little bit more worried about the them that we're here to serve. Thanks.
Thanks, Marcelle. And I think a couple of things I've taken out of that are, social services are often at their best in a crisis, and that urgent, immediate response is always fantastic. But also, the advocacy piece, and that's that longer term sort of change work that we really do need to do as part of our work as well. And I think some of that also comes back to the previous session, Sister Bridget's comments about getting the change is also about getting to the right person. And I think sometimes that's where our strength lies as well, because together we can sort of work our way through the system and work out, where's the right lever to pull to be able to make that change. So thank you. Okay, well, look, just opening it up a little bit more, I think. Was there anything for any of you that resonated there that you'd like to explore a little bit further? Or we have got a few questions that we can go back to. Yeah, Marcelle?
I just wanted to put a question to Craig, or ask for his comment, really. One of the things that I found coming into Mental Health Victoria, and those of you from outside Victoria, we've had a Royal Commission into our mental health services here in recent years. There's been this whole, literally, sort of structure that we're in the middle of trying to sort of develop and deliver as a state to try and lift and improve mental health services. And rightly, those services are centred around better relationships, better support for individuals and their families and carers, greater social connectedness, so both formal and informal and wraparound supports, all of the things that would be so familiar to people in this room. I was at a forum and I was standing beside some people from Batcho, and they were talking about the social and emotional wellbeing model of care in Aboriginal communities. And I sort of looked at the structure and the bureaucracy that we've designed out of the Royal Commission for Mental Health Reform. And I think if we ever get to realise it, what we're actually aspiring to do is replicate a model that Aboriginal communities have been living for years in terms of connectedness, holding the person, wrapping around, providing care, and understanding the role that communities play. Do you sort of feel that there are similar opportunities for First Nations communities to model back to the rest of Australia how we could collaborate better together, and how we could perhaps let go of some of the emphasis on individual and celebrate that commonality and community?
Thank you. I think there's a session tomorrow morning with Erica and Colleen Harmon, who are deeply involved in their communities and that are wonderful advocates for caring for the people that need in their communities. So I'm hoping they'll pick up on your question a little more. But I do think we, as non-Indigenous people, have a tendency to overcomplicate things, which is what you were saying with the scaffolds and the KPIs and everything else. But in this particular area, it's probably not answering your question exactly, but it's a good example. So the Aboriginal Catholic industry in Adelaide, it's the drop-in centre for people that come in from the lands, Port Augusta, and they just drop in and spend some time. There's no, you don't sign your name when you come in, you just come in and they do beading, or they do line dancing, or they do something else. So there was no structure at all. That was just to get people together. So what ended up happening out of that was a couple of people were chatting away and they said, "Oh, is there an auntie?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's right." But they were related to part of the stolen generation, but they had no idea. They had no idea. They just came in to do that. We had a lady who did something really poor mental health, and she started line dancing, and she got healthier and happier, started working. We had other people come in that were linked up with other organisations, and then all of a sudden it all just started to happen. It was organic. Everything that seems to work well is organic. And I think if we put too many plans in, it's like we were saying before, they once they start overcomplicating it, very difficult. I think for collaborating, to come with an open heart and to say, look, what can we learn out of the situation? Because that would make any sense. If I said to you, we want to do a program at the ACM, what are you going to do? I don't know. What are you going to talk about? But the outcomes, they're terrific. So I think we just have to be a bit more flexible in how we think about engaging with our first disclosure.
Thank you for that. You know, I think, just say being flexible about thinking about how we engage with people. It's probably one of the conversations that we had as well around schools. You know, in schools you talked about being the centre of the community, but it also can't be everything. And so how do we then collaborate better to ensure that our schools are central, but they're not being expected to take on roles that sit outside of their remit?
Yeah, thanks, Anita. It is a challenge, and I know there's a range of educators in the room. And the continuum with everyone's best interest. At one end, we've got teachers that are under so much pressure to care for, educate, and do everything they can for the student on a daily basis. And it's just too hard to then be expected to go above and beyond that. And I can absolutely understand and respect that position. And at the other end, often beyond the school gate, agencies and institutions who want to use the school as a vehicle to do as much as they possibly can. And naturally, we can all familiarise ourselves with that position we're in today. But the challenge is how we are clear what the role of the teacher or the educator is in a school, as opposed to what wraparound services we can do to inspire, enable, support the teacher, the student, the school community, and all those that come through it. When Max came about as the single entity for the Archdiocese and the schools here, one of the key early documents launched is titled Working Together in Mission. And specifically, that sought to give clarity and to begin to bind together the relationship between parish priests and their parish school at a time when the governance arrangements have clearly changed significantly. Now, a few years on, my reflection is there's still an enormous amount of work still to do in that space for a range of reasons. But one of the ways we might get better traction is by taking the conversation beyond the parish priest and the principal into the Catholic community or the broader community around that school. Yeah, there is a challenge, and I think educators in most instances do everything they can, but how we can support them to empower the student in the classroom. We'd all be aware of wraparound services which schools are keen to do. It's probably on the onus of those of us in the middle of those organisations to empower it to happen at the level.
Thank you, because I think it's interesting that you use the phrase beyond the school gate. And for anyone who's read the programme, the session after lunch will also include a presentation around Beyond the Gates, which is a programme that's operated by Catholic Care in Hunter Manning and really does aim to bridge that gap so that they're working within the school, within the family and within community to really create that wraparound effect for children.
So if I can, a tiny example, and there's a couple in the room here today, at NACS and other large Catholic social agencies, we are trying to explore what a new model for us could be in much closer partnership, a more formal partnership than it is today. And I'm excited about what kind of opportunities could come. But even talking about it, I'm fortunate to have the people in the room that we have. It is still very difficult because it's not the day job. So the challenge that I'm keen to explore is how my agencies, and obviously Matt's in a fortunate position, perhaps CDF are more than others also in terms of the resources that we have, but what might a pooling of funds look like to support an individual or a group of individuals that can do this work as their day job and not as an add-on.
No, absolutely. And so, Matthew, is that maybe an opening there for you to talk about how CDF might play a role in supporting within our diocese to sort of, look at how maybe we're measuring that impact or we're using IT better to be able to work across agencies at a diocesan level?
Yeah, it's one of the things I've been thinking about going about core businesses to provide lines and that's our regular day-to-day job. But I think one of the areas that we could lean into more is leveraging our expertise in financial modelling and planning, data management to help organisations find what might be on the track. It's really powerful when you've got a really good, clear financial model as to what you're going to be doing for the next 10 years to then win the support of donors and governments and bankers like ourselves to do confidence as to what you're going to do going forward. So that, and once you have that financial model in place, you're able to, better understand what the decisions are ahead of you and what strategic optionality you have ahead of you. And it helps inform the deliberations of boards and other decision makers along the way. So my observation is that organisations that do that modelling well, they're able to make much better decisions as to how they allocate resources, and also able to make much better lobbying efforts on others outside the organisations to entrust resources to them. So that would be, I guess, an area that Catholic Development Fund with its expertise could
Okay, thank you. We're getting sort of close to time, and we will go a little bit over, but we won't sort of, cut too much into the lunch, because I know that people start to get a bit hangry at this point. But just a couple of reflections, I guess, that we've talked about, and I think are important for us to be able to think about taking away as well. That yesterday we heard from Paul McDonald, CEO of Anglicare Victoria, who said that they didn't focus so much on their values, they focused on their actions, and their actions really were their values. And we also heard last night during the Mary McKillop oratory from Claire Victory, who spoke about action being the crux of ministry. So I think the challenge for us now is really how do we create real meaningful collaborations that we can action within our areas to get better impact for our communities, so we can better service vulnerable people. So I might throw it back to the panel to just see if there's any comments or observations on that before we go to questions from the floor. Marcelle?
Thanks, Anita. There's one thing that occurred to me in thinking about this coming into today was outside of the forum of this, how often would boards, for example, or leadership teams get together between agencies and look at what their common strategy could be? We are so well trained to sort of look down into an enterprise, but never across. And, just that starting point might lead to some really, powerful sort of outcomes and powerful change. And I think probably just two other points I want to make. One is that certainly the community services sector is the most grossly underfunded when we put aside education and healthcare. At every Catholic and otherwise, it is just grossly underfunded. But if we have a look at the collective footprint of Catholic ministry in Australia, it is massive and it is well resourced. When you marry together the expertise and the physical and financial resources between healthcare, community services and education, it's enormous. I always used to think, particularly being in Canberra, pardon my language, if we ever really got our shit together, it would be an unstoppable force for change and for good. But we don't, because we are too siloed, there's too much mistrust, there's too much suspicion between services and agencies and disciplines, and so it just doesn't happen. So we shoot ourselves in the foot time and time again and stop it before it starts. So I think a little bit of courage, a little bit of daring, a little bit of humility in terms of opening up those conversations between entities, in terms of, calling us back to the theme of this event. How can we realise the common good and how can we work together in common for the betterment of our communities and pool our resources and pool our expertise? Because I stand at the foot of giants here in this room today, of people who have been doing this effectively in communities, unsung heroes for decades. And they make change every day, but that rarely gets captured or harnessed or utilised in terms of driving systemic change. That's where the gap is, taking that individual local practice and harnessing that into a wave of change. So that's the opportunity before each of us. So that opportunity to lift our gaze and work together and get outside our own boundaries.
Thank you for that. So I think Marcelle, what I'm hearing from you is we really need to just leave our egos at the door and really look to the common good as our goalpost. So thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just go to Edward and then we might open this up to questions.
Just a thought to that. I agree entirely, and I'm grateful there was a sputtering of applause because it's an important point. Pope Francis Gaudet in Exsultate, whenever I can, I go to his 5 signs of holiness because it provides a bit of a game plan in terms of how we might action some of that. And I know they'll be familiar to many, but I write them down because I always get to 3 and forget a couple. Perseverance, and I think that's evident in bucket loads in the room. Joy and a sense of humour. Boldness and passion in community and in constant prayer. And for me, those are 5 signposts that begin to undertake the work required to change the dialogue.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, look, any questions from the floor? One over here. Thank you to all of you. There was a bit of a question, or there was a comment from you, Matthew, that people who are investing or people who perhaps we might have looking to join our organisations are often looking at what the outcomes are. And I think that exists in a context where there is a lot of workload pressure or there is accountability structures, whether that's in funding or otherwise, that often puts the focus, or whether easy reporting is on outputs, on the amount of service we deliver, or the number of whatever it is that we're doing. Do you have any thoughts, or does the panel have any thoughts on how we keep the focus on outcomes and how we live that through our work, and then also how we communicate that back to people who we might want to attract?
Okay, it's a hard problem to solve, and I noted at the beginning I wasn't an expert in this area, but you all know that what gets measured gets done, and really clear measurement around the priority goals is really important. I think that I guess my observation of where it's been done well, and I've had some experience with some partnership when you might be in the room. They had the Journey to Social Inclusion program, and they had some really rigorous data and evidence points around that journey to social inclusion, getting people into saddle housing and helping them along the journey. And they had to do that because there wasn't quite a structured program and funding. You had to get the funding and demonstrate the outcomes to get the funding from government in. And it was hard work. And I have to say that I think they did an amazing job, but it was a long journey and very difficult to do. And it requires a great deal of skill and the ability to master data to evidence that to everyone involved. So not really an answer to the question, just acknowledgement this is difficult. But I certainly think that when you look around the world at organisations which are doing really well, they've got great purpose and what they're doing, we've got great mission and vision. And Catholic organisations have got really, really well work. That's our aim. But they also have an operating model that is data-driven, and in particular, with Google and all that sort of work. They do that really well, really well. We don't do that well, and you have to learn to do that well in order to survive and also to thrive in the future. So but fortunately, the tools are being, I guess, say mainstream and industrialised and made much cheaper. And so I think over the coming decades there'll be enormous opportunities for us to leverage, built-in AI, machine learning, the ability to aggregate data and sort it and use it will emerge, and there'll be certain opportunities for us to capture that at a reasonable cost. So, bit of a waffly answer there, I know, but it's not a hope rather than demonstration.
Thank you for that. Any further questions from the floor? Yep, we've got one down here. We may have another one in the mic.
Thank you for your conversation. I'm really interested in sort of Marcelle's point, but with her I worked in a very large Catholic healthcare organisation at one time in our lives. What I want to know is what action we need to make to initiate this conversation with really the most economically powerful and probably politically engaged group, which is Centacare, and more particularly some of the really powerful hospital groups, because ostensibly the people we support and care for, often ending their care and love. And we need to make sure that we can transmit those conversations, engage a way forward for us to represent our community. So I'd be interested to know if there's actions the group think could be possible to engage in a first-order conversation. So we've been talking about this for a long time.
Thank you for that. And I think, that point is probably what I'm hoping to leave people on today, that we all go away thinking about what actions can we take as individuals in our own space, and where we do have some opportunity to influence and make a difference. I think, for me, from what the panel has spoken about today, one of the things I will take away is Marcelle's point about our board. I mean, we have a great board for Catholic Care Services in Far North Queensland. Council's only just down the road, and I know Torres here somewhere, and they face very similar issues to us. So why don't we get those boards together and see how they can work together to be able to leverage off each other's ideas and thoughts and experience. So that's one of my takeaways. Any comments from the panel on how people might be able to put into action what we've talked about?
Thanks, Megan. Thanks for the question, Tony. I think one of the things would be at forums like this, inviting Catholic Health in to present, which will then mean that they're listening, and vice versa, getting on the agenda for the Catholic Health Australia Conference and showcasing some of the expertise for the Catholic community services sector. And similarly, in terms of the education conferences and agendas, that's one forum. But I think to utilise what is already available, so things like the I'm not getting the name wrong, but the Australian Public Jury Persons Ministerial Group, AMPJP, I think is the acronym, through forums like that, asking those groups of trustees who are stewarding education, community services and health services, putting a challenge to them to help us to, as agencies on the ground, to build greater collaboration and to drive investment literally in terms of cross-collaboration and initiatives, and generate forums, host forums, to bring people together around specific issues. So rather than getting it together as a huge thing, something like disability, for example, which is undergoing massive reform and has touch points across community services, health and education, would be a natural issue to coalesce around in terms of how we could work together better to sort of form some effective solutions. So utilise the forums available, and then let's get a bit creative in terms of putting a challenge back, because we get a lot of top down, so let's sort of throw some questions back at.
Thank you for that. We're getting pretty close to time. We've got a couple of more minutes. We can take one more question. We've got one final one.
Very fast, and thank you to the whole group, and particularly to Marcelle. Look, back in the early 70s, late 60s, there was a group in Victoria which was really vibrant, and it was called Maintenance and Superintendents. Some were faith-based and some were not faith-based. They were a mixture of everything. They had a big gathering like this each year together, and as the thought came through that we have to deinstitutionalise, which was a bit radical then, when one group stepped forward to start doing it, everybody else was cheering and really urging them forward. Do you think that's a dream in these days, or do you think such a thing could happen again?
No, I don't think it's a dream, and I think I know without, I'm not going to name them because they'll kill me afterwards in the break, but there are some people in here who are really great at just bringing disparate people together around common passions and common issues. And a lot of this work starts informally, and it starts through one-to-one personal connections and relationships. And so again, coming back to your point, Craig, of we can overcomplicate things. Start it with the one-to-one relationships. Have a coffee with somebody, make a time, in a week's time, to have a coffee with someone you've met here, or set up an online sort of chat, check in, talk about, what's sort of still galvanising you. So that sort of energy, I think, we can lose sight of it because we all get drawn back into the doing, and that's the most, I don't know about you, but I find that the most debilitating and de-energising aspect of my work, doing. The energising is forging our connections and sharing those ideas and roofing off one another's energy and inspiration. And I don't think we value that enough because it doesn't always lead to change. But sometimes these things are about planting a seed that do generate change further down the track. And I think we can't have too many relationships, we can't have too many people that we're building those informal and formal networks with if this is the kind of change we want to see.
Thanks very much. And thanks everyone. I think that was, a nice way to finish, and I think the importance of informal and formal networks, and I think we need to recognise, CSSG, CSSA and our other big agencies as well, because they really are those formal avenues for us to be able to collaborate and work together. If people are looking for an example of some collaborations in action, there is one of the sessions after lunch, which is around the Beyond the Gates and School Savvy program, so that's that very practical stuff. But, obviously we've got a lot of sessions going on, so if people can't get to those, there will be some information available as well. So that might be an example. I will say thank you very much to all of you for being here and for your patience. Thank you for letting us go a little bit over time. Thank you to all of our panel members. So we have Marcelle Mogg, Craig Arthur, Matthew Cassin and Dr. Simons. Thank you all very much. So if you can just put your hands together, then I think I will be handing back to our next consultant.